welcome. Glad to see you all here this afternoon, and welcome to those of you who are watching via live stream as well. We're pleased to have Brandon Swain here today as part of the library's What the Health series. Brandon Swain is a public health educator with the Arkansas Department of Health in Hometown Health Improvement. He provides technical assistance, educational materials, and presentations throughout Northwest Arkansas. He has a bachelor's degree in pharmacological studies from Westminster College and a master's in public health from the University of Missouri. He's here today to teach us about QPR, question, persuade, and refer. 3 steps anyone can learn to help prevent suicide. Brandon, thank you for being here.
So, like she said, we're going to be talking about QPR today, which is suicide prevention. So, purpose of QPR, it's not a treatment. It comes with a lot of questions, but it can be used as an intervention, not something that's a fix-all for anything. It doesn't prevent every single suicide, but it's a lot of steps that can be used in order to give somebody the best chance in order to do that. The Good Samaritan law applies to these people too that are gatekeepers, which are people that are able to go out and help people if they're dealing with these stressful times in their life. So we'll start with some statistics. So over the past 20 years, the number of suicides in the U.S. has increased significantly, from 32,000 to 48,000. And it doesn't seem like it's slowing down. There was a slight drop-off, looks like during the COVID years, but it's been pretty much a straight-up trajectory for a while, and it's one of the public health topics that doesn't get discussed enough. If you look at the states, Arkansas is tied for 12th with 20.4 per 100,000 people. To put that in perspective, the U.S. average is 14.5. So as a small state, we're higher than the U.S. average. But there are also states that are in very rural communities, or rural states like Wyoming and Montana and Alaska, New Mexico, that have very high rates of suicide. And I'll go into some of the target populations in just a minute. So the big picture, an estimated 10 million adults think about suicide each year. 1.2 million plan a method of suicide, and over 750,000 attempt suicide. And that's a very conservative number. It's more than likely much higher. And approximately 48,000 or more people die by suicide each year. Looking at the leading causes of death, it's number 11 overall, but it's the 3rd leading cause of death for young people, so 15 to 24-year-olds, it's the 3rd leading cause of death. And that's almost tripled since 1950. So looking at the vulnerable populations, so I work in, like you said, Northwest Arkansas, but for me, Northwest Arkansas also encompasses all the way up to Baxter County. And during that time of travel, I'll see a lot of different rural areas, and it's not the same as being in Benton, Washington County, where I grew up. And so it opens your eyes a little bit to the struggles that they might be dealing with. In fact, the highest rate of suicide by occupation is people that are in farming, fishing, or forestry. There are 90 deaths per 100,000 people for men in these professions compared to a national average of 16. So it's quite a big difference for people in these fields and occupations. This also means that suicide rates among farmers are 6 times higher than the national average, and almost all of them are males. It's also worth noting that rural populations do have a significantly higher suicide rate compared to urban populations. According to the CDC, between 2000 and 2020, the suicide rate in rural areas of America increased by 46% compared to just 27% in urban America. So even though there may not be people that are living, like there's a group of people that, or a lot of people live in Washington, Benton County, you would think that there would be a higher rate of suicide, but it's actually those areas that don't get as much medical attention, don't get the mental help that they need. Those areas are a lot more vulnerable. Also, the LGBTQ youth population. According to a 2021 survey, 42% of LGBTQ youth, including more than half of transgender and non-binary youth, seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. including more than half of transgender and non-binary youth. And this survey included 35,000 responses, so it wasn't a small sample either. LGBTQ youth who experienced discrimination on the basis of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and or race or ethnicity reported much higher rates of suicide. It's another population that is a significantly higher rate compared to the normal population for suicide. The last one I'll mention, this is just three that I'm just going to go over. It's not three that, these are the top three. These are just three that I wanted to highlight. The veterans and people that are in military service. I'm sure we've heard of people that come back from war or in the military that have PTSD, and that's a mental health disorder. And a 2004 survey, this was looking at, I believe it was before and post-deployment to Iraq or Afghanistan or the Middle East. There was a study of 4 U.S. combat infantry units that surveyed perceived mental health barriers and stigma among military service members. They found that of those respondents who met the criteria for a mental health disorder, 65% of them believed that they would have been seen as weak if they were not to receive mental health counseling or services. Basically, they're saying that if you are in the military, it's frowned upon, you're going to get looked at differently if you even take advantage of those resources that you might have available. And obviously, once they get back and they're out of the service, it becomes even harder to get those resources. Moreover, nearly half of military service members who died by suicide in 2010, which was 140, had a known failure in a spousal or intimate relationship, with 84 experiencing the failure within the month prior to the suicide. So again, not having the resources and the stability behind them in order to combat these mental health disorders is problematic. I'll also say that soldiers are most at risk for suicide because they're least likely to ask for help. Again, going to the 2004 survey, I know it's from 2004, but it still holds true even now. If you're in a alpha male type of position, it is frowned upon in order to seek help. You don't want to give help, you don't want to ask for help, but you're okay giving help. And so it's important to note that the people that might need it, you might have to bring it to them. Their population, you might not be able to find them, seek them out, they might not be seeking you out. But if you know that they might need the help and they don't have those resources, it's important to help them because they're not going to go out there and seek it for themselves. So we're going to go through some suicide myths and facts. So myth 1, no one can stop a suicide, it is inevitable. The fact is that if people in a crisis get the help they need, they may actually never be suicidal again. Myth 2 is asking a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. Asking someone directly about suicidal intent lowers anxiety, opens up communication, and lowers the risk of a suicide attempt. That's the actual reality. If you can't necessarily place that thought in their head. They're either going to have it or they're not going to have it. But a lot of times they just want somebody to speak to open up to. Again, going back to the veterans, just somebody to have counseling with or mental health services, just to be open with somebody, because a lot of times if you combine that, it can lead to something like suicide. Myth 3, only experts can prevent suicide. That's not correct. Suicide prevention is everybody's business and anyone can help prevent the tragedy of a suicide. Myth 4, people considering suicide keep their plans to themselves. That's not true. Most people considering suicide communicate their intent sometime during the week of preceding their attempt. And we'll go through some of the signs or symptoms you can look for in those people, the people that are at risk for those communicating those thoughts. Because sometimes they're not going to be overly abrupt and you're not going to be able to notice them. They're not going to just come out and say it, but there are a lot of signs that you can look for in order for people that might be considering that. And those who talk about suicide do not do it. The fact is, people who talk about suicide may try or even complete an act of self-destruction. There are many more myths and facts about suicide than these, but these have been chosen as effective in combating many pre-existing false beliefs. And the last one is, once a person decides to commit suicide, there's nothing you can do. It's game over, essentially. And the fact is that suicide is the most preventable kind of death, and it can literally just take one person showing care and showing kindness to somebody in order to help save their life. So we're going to go through how you can help. You can ask the questions. These will be the suicide clues and warning signs you might want to look for. So it's important to note you should take all the signs seriously. There are more clues and signs observed. The more clues and signs observed are the greater. The more clues and signs observed, the greater the risk. So there's direct, indirect, verbal clues, and behavioral clues and situational clues. Okay. So direct verbal clues, kind of just coming out and saying this, and this is not always the way that it comes, but these are verbatim quotes from people who had the intent of committing suicide. I've decided to kill myself. I wish I were dead. I'm going to commit suicide. I'm going to end it all. If such and such happens, if somebody breaks up with me, or if I don't get a good grade on this exam, or if I don't get this job, I'm going to kill myself. So some indirect verbal clues these are where you probably should look more into. I'm tired of life. I just can't go on. My family would be better off without me. Who cares if I'm dead anyway? I just want out. I won't be around much longer, and pretty soon you won't have to worry about me. And so, before I go further, the indirect verbal clues, if you can tie some of those with some of the behavioral, the situational clues, you're more likely going to be able to find somebody that might need that help. Because sometimes you might just hear somebody say this and might not take it seriously, but if you notice some other things that are behavioral or situational that might have happened in their life or the way they're acting, you can compile those in order to help them. So behavioral clues would be any previous suicide attempt, also acquiring a gun or stockpiling pills, co-occurring depression, moodiness, hopelessness, so essentially kind of like the veterans or the LGBTQ community, and just anybody really, the mental health aspect. If you notice somebody that has that or know somebody that has that, and you notice they've said something like an indirect or even a direct verbal clue, that's a good sign that you might need to get them help, and we'll go through how to do that in just a minute. Also putting personal affairs in order. So if I'm 27, if I was to get a will and then start saying stuff like this, it would be very out of place because one, I don't know how to do that, and two, it's be very odd given my age. So for somebody that has mental health disorder or something like that, and you know that they've just gone through a difficult time and they've made kind of some of the indirect verbal clues, and then they start putting their personal affairs in order, and that can include just like giving away possessions, which is the next one. So if you have a bunch of prized possessions that are valuables, and you start just giving them away instead of selling them, that's a good sign too. Also, if you have a sudden interest or disinterest in religion, and drug or alcohol abuse or relapse after a period of recovery, and unexplained anger, aggression, or irritability. So looking at the situational clues, being fired or expelled from school, recent unwanted move, loss of any major relationship. That's, again, it's very important to note with the veterans or military service. Death of a spouse, child, or best friend, especially if it's by suicide. Diagnosis of a serious or terminal illness. And sudden unexpected loss of freedom or fear of punishment. Anticipated loss of financial security, or loss of a cherished therapist, counselor, teacher, a family friend, or fear of becoming a burden to others. So any of these, one of these could be a sign for somebody that might be dealing with that. And these don't cover every single basis, these are just some of them. But if you notice multiple from the different categories, you should definitely try to get them the help that they probably need. So tips for asking a question: if in doubt, don't wait, just ask the question. By the question, I mean you can be direct with it, and I believe it goes into direct and indirect approaches too, but I might get ahead of myself a little bit, but asking the question, if you are going to worry about somebody that might have experienced any of those signs or symptoms, waiting to ask that question could be too late by the time it gets around. If the person is reluctant, be persistent, but don't be overly pushy. Sometimes they might need to open up to somebody else that they feel more comfortable with. Don't do it in a public setting, do it in a private setting. And just allow them to talk freely. I think you can give them some open-ended questions, letting them vent, letting them get their emotions out can a lot of times alleviate the desire that they might have in order to commit suicide. And give yourself plenty of time. If you know you have a meeting at 3 and you wanted to ask the question at 2:30, it's probably not going to give you enough time. And so you want to be able to you can devote enough time to this individual or whoever you're helping in order to give them your full attention and full amount of time so that you can help them however long it may take. And also have your resources handy. The QPR has some resources online. There's some phone numbers. There's the 988 number. If you know that they've been to a counselor before, if you know the name of the counselor or the practice that they're at, letting them know, but getting them any information that they can reach out to other resources besides just you. Also, how you ask the question is less important than that you ask it. So just getting worked up about how you phrase it or how you might word it, just being able to ask it opens up that door for them to be communicative with you about how they're feeling and everything. So QPR is, like she said, question, persuade, and refer. So under question, there's the direct and indirect approach, also identifying questions to avoid. The persuade category, it's how do you persuade somebody to stay alive. And refer, how and to whom will you refer the person that you just helped. So you might have helped them and alleviate a certain situation for that moment, but it doesn't mean that it can't come back. And so getting them some long-term help, letting them know that you're still there for them, but also getting somebody that can be there long-term, like a counselor or a pastor or a family friend, somebody like that can be there for them is very important. So looking at the question, the less direct approach, this is kind of just trying to scratch the surface, let them open up to you, gain some comfort. But you can ask them, have you been unhappy lately or very unhappy lately? Or have you been very unhappy lately that you've been thinking about ending your life? Or do you wish that you could go to sleep and never wake up? If they hinted at something with one of those indirect signs earlier, you could go back and ask this question in order to stimulate the process. Or if you know the person very well, you have a good relationship with them, and you feel you can be very direct with them, you could simply just ask them, when people are upset as you seem to be, given whatever situation they might be in, they sometimes wish they were dead. I'm wondering if you're feeling that way too. Are you thinking about killing yourself? So just being very direct with it, trying to get it, cut out the rest of the stuff so you can get to the point of it. Also, if you can't ask the question or you don't feel comfortable with it, make sure you find somebody that can. So if you may know somebody in passing from work or at school, and if you don't know them super well, but you know their friend or their parents or one of their teachers or whoever, make sure you tell them so that they can ask the question. So when it comes to how not to ask the question, you shouldn't say, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? Suicide is a dumb idea. Surely you are not thinking about suicide. So the point with these, although it might seem very straightforward, but the point is to not pass judgment on them, not to make them feel guilty for their thoughts. You want to let them feel like they can be open and honest with their thoughts and not feel judged for that. If they feel like they're going to be attacked or they feel like they're being looked down on because of the emotions that they're having, they're less likely to open up to you. So persuading someone to stay alive, this involves a lot of active listening, just letting them talk, letting them open up. Listen to the problem, give them your full attention. Again, making sure you have plenty of time in order to give that to them, no matter how long it takes. And also, suicide is not the problem, only a perceived solution in an insolvable problem. So to them, they might be in pain, they might be, whether it's emotional or physical, they might have gotten some very bad news, and their desired solution in their mind is to commit suicide, and that is the way they're going to solve it. That's not the problem. The problem is that you need to get them help for the mental health side, from the emotional side, or however they're looking at it, and just be active listening and let them explain everything to them, because how you might perceive it might be much different than how they perceive it. And again, don't rush to judgment, and make sure you offer hope in any form. Let them talk and offer them some reassurance, and continue to let them talk and be just active listening. So after you've done the question, you want to refer them or persuade them to go get help or seek help from somebody else. You'll want to ask, will you go with me to get help? Will you let me help you get help? Doing it along with them. Don't just say, I'll refer you to somebody and let them go on their way. Make sure you go with them and stay with them as long as they need, because they'll feel, if you've established that connection, they'll feel safe around you, and they feel like they can trust you, and that's the most important thing that somebody that's having these thoughts might need. Also, when it comes to refer, suicidal people often believe they cannot be helped, so you may have to do more. They might feel like they're the problem, and it's really not them at all. It has nothing to do with them. It's just situations, it's just circumstances, and you have to be able to understand that they might, again, perceive it differently than you would. And there are a lot of different avenues you can go about this when it comes to refer. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but family friend or clergy, if they're very religious, talking to their pastor, priest, or youth group leader, whoever it may be, to get them the help, because you may be able to help them in that moment, but if they can get that long-term help from somebody that they already have that established relationship with, it can do wonders for them in their mental health and getting down the path that they need. So the best referral involves taking the person directly to somebody who can help. The next best referral is getting commitment from them to accept help, and then making the arrangements to get them the help. And third best referral is to get referral information and try to get them to do a good faith commitment. I would say that walking through it with them is the best option you can. If you absolutely have to do the number 2 or 3, then that's just the circumstances that you're dealt with. But if you can walk through it with them to wherever they're needing to go, again, making sure you have plenty of time, I think that's the best thing you can do to give them somebody hope. Any willingness to accept help at some time, even if in the future is a good outcome. So they may not be super optimistic on that day that you help them. They might still feel down on themselves. They might feel very sad, upset. But if they continue over a period of time, continue to change their mood and get more hope and more optimism, that can change the outcome dramatically in the end. So again, encouraging them to be with others, encouraging them to open up, and just letting them speak whatever their problems they're going through. Since almost all efforts to persuade someone to live instead of attempt suicide will be met with agreement and relief, don't hesitate to get involved or take the lead. With that being said, again, if you don't feel comfortable taking the lead, make sure you find somebody that can. So when it comes to some pro tips for effective QPR, offering encouragement, saying things like, I want you to live, I'm on your side, we'll get through this. Anything that gives them the reassurance that you're there for them and you want them around and that they're not the problem. Get others involved. Ask the person who might be able to help. A lot of times you may not be the one that they're necessarily wanting to help, but you might be there for that certain situation. But there are, again, other people, friends, family, clergy, even doctors that could help and provide a lot of much needed relief for them during this time. And helping them get to that referral or that help is the best thing you can do. So some more pro tips: join a team, offer to work with clergy, therapists, psychiatrists, whomever is going to provide the counseling or treatment. Follow up with a visit or a phone call or a card to whoever you're helped, and let them know that you're still thinking about them, that you want to have them have the hope that you have in them. And let the person know you care about them no matter what happens. You're always there for them, and providing that hope will allow that, go to the next slide, allow that seed of hope to grow. Essentially, hope helps prevent suicide. Communication helps prevent suicide. Being able to know if you have limitations in how you can help somebody, that can help too. You may not be able to be best equipped for that certain situation, but if you know somebody or you can ask somebody else, whoever it is, that can help somebody save their lives, and that's the most important thing. Any questions? Renee?
One of the tips or the best way to refer somebody was to go with them and take them someone directly yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Where would that be? In our area, where would that be?
So, there are a variety of different options. It kind of just depends on what's best for that person. If they're really involved in a church and they feel like they're close with their pastor, you can take them to the church office. If it's a counselor, you can take them there. If they don't have a counselor, there are a lot of mental health options, and I can send you. I didn't bring it with me today, but there are some resources locally and nationally that you can call. The 988 number, it's the suicide prevention number that's very important. That's probably the best way to go about it, but if you can refer them and take them with you, I think that's a really good outcome.
I know I've seen some ads for some places that, you can't wait for care, and I can't remember the name of the place, but, you can get immediate mental health counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know if you had any experience with that.
I believe that the 988, if you call the 988 number, they'll speak to you, and it's the national hotline. I believe they'll speak to you. I think it's 24/7, so you can call them anytime. When it comes to locally, I don't know if there's a place that does it specifically, but I can definitely look into it and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Another question is, what happens in the case where someone is showing signs of planning on doing suicide and they don't really want to be referred to services, or they don't give consent to be referred? What should we do in this case?
So I would just say be as persistent as you can, but don't try to push them too far because you might do more harm than good. I believe that there's always at least one person in everybody's life that they'll listen to, no matter what the circumstances are. So again, finding that one person can be a needle in a haystack sometimes. So it depends. But if you're not making a lot of headway, I would try to see if somebody else could try to take a different approach. But it kind of just depends on the situation. They might not necessarily give consent to go to a counseling situation, but if you know somebody, again, the priest, or if you know somebody that's a family friend that they are close to, if you can bring them to the situation or have them come over and help however they can, you don't necessarily have to provide consent to that. You're not taking them to a referral.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, thank you for letting me present today. I appreciate it a lot.